That was just a clip from the LA Triathlon. I know we're not here to talk about triathlon, but there were something like 160 rescues in that particular event. And, well, everybody went home, which is good. But it gives you some idea of what it takes from our perspective to organize some of these events properly. You saw some of the equipment, you saw those rescue buoys out in the water, and so on. I was at the International Swimming Hall of Fame a while ago. After an award ceremony that went on, Stephen came up and introduced himself to me, and we had a bit of a discussion. And a guy from Long Beach or someplace, California, came up. And while Stephen was telling me how he liked my presentation and so on, which was very nice, this guy came up to harangue me about the fact that he was going to put on some sort of an event down there in Long Beach, and that the lifeguards were insisting that these guys were, to get a permit, going to need to pay for what the lifeguards considered to be an adequate level of safety protection. And basically telling me that he thought that was just an outrage, that they were having to pay this, and how were they going to put their event on. I didn't have a chance to have a long conversation with him, but I guess we're here today because we understand, in retrospect, why we need adequate safety at these kinds of events. We're here today because of a terrible tragedy, but we're also here because of a sense on the part of many that the norms of existing safety measures in open water event swimming are just plain inadequate, and there are some changes that are needed. There are clearly people who feel like this is a small problem and just little tweaking is needed. But there are also people who feel that this is just too dangerous a sport and it just needs to end because it can't be managed safely. What I'm here to tell you is that the truth is somewhere in the middle. There's some adjustments needed, and hopefully at this event we'll have the opportunity to find those adjustments and set some examples that hopefully will be adopted and accepted and appreciated around the world. My profession is in aquatic safety. I worked as lifeguard chief for the city of San Diego for 13 years and 22 years as an open water lifeguard in San Diego. Right now I volunteer my time, have for about 8 years as the president of the United States Lifesaving Association, and for the past 13 years as the president of the Americas region of the International Lifesaving Federation. And if you want more information on my credentials or whatever, there's a website down there at the bottom, but I won't bore you with all that. What I want to start out by saying is, I don't know how to do what you do. I'm not an expert in what you do. I'm not a coach. I'm not an event organizer. I'm not a competitive athlete. You're the experts on that, and I respect that. My expertise, our expertise, is in keeping people floating in the water. That's what we do for a living. That's the problem you have right now, and that's why we came here. So I'm going to endeavor to confine my remarks to my area of expertise, which is open water safety, and defer to you on all the rest of it. And I'd appreciate some possibility that you might return the favor. What's happened here in open water competitive swimming, what needs to be righted, stems from a lack of adequate attention to safety. There have been a lot of close calls. There have been deaths. Perhaps that's due to lack of consultation with experts who ensure open water aquatic safety. Perhaps it's due to a desire to do it on the cheap. There seems to be a sense that if the sport gets too expensive, the sport is no longer viable. But of course, if the sport is viewed as unnecessarily dangerous, it's also no longer viable. The good news is that open water events have been held with excellent levels of safety for decades. So our goal should be to make that the norm everywhere for the good of the athletes and for the good of the sport. We're here to tell you that using commonly accepted practices for open water safety, open water events can be made much, much safer. A nagging question for me, though, especially in the wake of the death of Fran Crippen, is whether the major sanctioning bodies are ready to act, whether they're ready to accept the need for change. The fact that this event today was organized is inspiring, very much so. The fact that you're here is inspiring. The fact that it was inspired based on a sense that someone needed to do something is not so inspiring. It's troubling. In some places, the wagons are circled. So there's work to be done by those of us who genuinely accept a need for change. And hopefully today we start that discussion in earnest. So I think there's a lot of people who feel that organizing a 10K swim should require about the same sort of safety as organizing a 10K run. You know, number of people, they compete, pay an entry fee, whatever. But the problem is that if somebody falls down or collapses in a 10K run, they fall to the ground. Somebody goes and picks them up. If someone collapses in a 10K swim, they may just disappear, which is apparently what happened to Fran Crippen. Just disappear. The simple reality is that it's far more complicated, more challenging, more labor-intensive to keep people safe in an open water swim than in a run, in a bike race or some other land-based competition. But it's entirely possible. Every year, the United States Lifesaving Association collects statistics from lifeguard agencies around the country. Well over 100 report each year. Just to give you an idea, in the last year where we have full statistics, 2009, there were over 83,000 rescues from drowning by beach lifeguard agencies in the country. But one of the key statistics we solicit is, or two key statistics, is attendance and the number of drowning deaths in lifeguarded areas, lifeguard-protected areas. And that's what that is. For every 18 million people who visit our beaches, estimated attendance, there's one drowning death in a lifeguarded area. So 1 in 18 million. Now, we think that's a pretty good safety record. It'd be nice if it was better, but it indicates to us that we're doing a reasonably good job. So I wondered, how might this apply to your world, your events? And I took the same figures and estimated that the average open water event, and clearly I don't have a clue about this, but that the average open water event involved 300 competitors. And if you had that same safety record, then there should be one death for every 60,000 events. I'm not sure if you have that record, but it seems like that's where you should be, except it's not a fair comparison. And the reason it's not a fair comparison is that when we're safeguarding beaches where people just walk up, whoever they are, some of them are great swimmers, some of them are mediocre swimmers, some of them are non-swimmers, and that 1 in 18 million applies to all of them. In your case, these are competitive swimmers who ought to have a pretty good idea of what they were doing. But then let's move this to world-class events like the one in the United Arab Emirates, where there were under 80 competitors. At those places, the safety record should be impeccable. I just can't imagine, as a professional lifesaver, how you can lose track of somebody in an event with 80 people in it. So in this context, there seems to me to be no plausible excuse for what happened to Fran Crippen. I can't imagine it. So after the tragedy in the Emirates, the president of FINA was quoted by the Philadelphia Inquirer as stating, "All was under strict rules that exist in our competition, all was absolutely correct." He probably wishes he didn't say that at this point, but it gives you some idea of the mindset that we're dealing with here, and perhaps why we're here perhaps leading some change as opposed to that gentleman. My immediate reaction was, if all was absolutely correct, according to the rules that exist in your competition, then you've got a big problem with your rules, a big problem. In any case, FINA soon announced that they would investigate. And of course, I wondered, maybe some of you wondered, would it be a real investigation? Many were skeptical, including apparently USA Swimming, who said they were going to launch their own independent investigation. But a question for me was whether USA Swimming's own rules were any better than those of FINA's rules. Was this an exercise in finger pointing, or might there be some real positive outcomes? Now, I'm unfamiliar with, I'm ignorant of FINA's safety standards, aside from this statement here. But I'm of the view that if they were followed in the UAE, they were inadequate. I've read USA Swimming's Open Water Meet Manager Guide, or at least the 2 pages of it that are devoted to safety, the 2 pages. And it starts off with a nice statement that safety is the paramount issue in the organization and conduct of any open water swim event, and I agree with that. So as you read through it, along with the Coast Guard and Harbor Patrols, it suggests inviting local paddle sport clubs to participate, but cautions, quote, ascertain in advance if there will be any charges associated with their support. Meantime, I can find no specific mention of any plan for search and rescue of a missing swimmer. Not that that might ever be needed. The possibility of a missing swimmer is just not taken into consideration. So the safety portion of the USA Swimming Plan cautions, do not try to do it alone. Try local Sea and Boy Scouts, civic groups, local swim clubs, boat clubs. Many will help for a shirt or their name and organization on the programs and press releases. Again, aiming to do it on the cheap here. There seems to be no mention anywhere of having lifeguards or people with training in open water rescue on the course. So I've got to ask, is safety the paramount issue? Is safety the paramount issue for either of these 2 organizations, or has it been? After Fran Crippen's death, there were communications from the athletes and Fran Crippen himself that surfaced about safety. Many of you probably read some of the emails back and forth, the brainstorming that they had been doing before this tragedy, and some of them afterwards, about what really needed to be done to make these events more safe. It seemed clear to me in reading that he knew, that they knew something was just not right. They didn't seem to know quite what or how to address it exactly. But why should they? Why should they? They're the athletes. It's not up to them to make sure that the event is safe. It's up to us. It's up to you to make sure that the events are safe. In October, FINA assembled a task force of 5 people to review that event in the UAE. And to their credit, they included, I'm happy to say, at least one open water safety expert who's the Secretary General of our international federation, the International Lifesaving Federation. I'm told that their recommendations are complete and have gone to FINA's board for review, including 40 recommendations that they refer to as Crippen recommendations to avoid similar accidents in the future. We will see, I guess, if they see the light of day and if they're meaningful and if they bring about change. I really don't know. USA Swimming also assembled a commission. It apparently includes no expert in open water safety. None. This perplexes, it concerns me, and I hope it concerns you as well. Many years ago at the '72 Munich Olympics, you'll remember that some athletes were held hostage and several were killed. In the wake of that tragedy, the IOC assembled experts to improve security at future Olympics for understandable reasons. I understand that those experts were security experts, and that seems appropriate and instructive to me. For you would not want to leave it to the athletes or coaches to devise ways to avoid having athletes kidnapped and killed. It's simply not their area of expertise. So too for aquatic safety. In October, the USLA offered assistance to USA Swimming, gave them a copy of our recommended guidelines, and we've been assured we'll be invited by their commission to give testimony or give recommendations. So we look forward to that opportunity, but we've not heard anything since November about it. So I turn my attention to the tragedy in the UAE because I want to talk sort of specifically about this. After Fran Crippen's death, there was much speculation about the heat as an underlying cause, about the heat of the water, about the heat of the air. Other people speculated about some physical issue related to Mr. Crippen that might have contributed to his death, some unexpected physiological reaction, whatever. I can't say the degree to which those things might be contributing factors. They may be. It's not my area of expertise. My area of expertise, our area of expertise, is keeping people floating in the water. So I consider this whole thing about heat to be a complete diversion from the big picture. Complete diversion from the big picture. Or for that matter, what may have happened. Heat or any physical anomalies of Mr. Crippen, heat or any physical anomalies of Mr. Crippen are not the main problem here. The main problem is apparently no one saw his distress and responded to it. That's the problem. Could be cold water, hypothermia, it could be hot, it could be any kind of problem. That's the failure here. That's what we need to address. Any number of things we know very well can result in swimmers submerging, sinking, and sometimes suddenly and silently. It's every lifeguard's nightmare, I can assure you. You don't want to be the lifeguard on the beach when that happens, when you miss that rescue. Even if someone sees them, if the rescuer doesn't get there fast enough, the swimmer disappears. And you'd better have both a plan and trained personnel equipped for rapid search and recovery to pick them up, to find them. Boy Scouts are not going to provide that no matter how nice the t-shirts are that you give them. There's a standard procedure used by open water lifeguard agencies in the United States for rapid search and recovery of missing swimmers. It requires planning, personnel, and equipment at the ready. It's been tested and implemented in the breach. While 1 in 18 million is a good record, part of our job is to take care of the one. I've spent most of this talk critiquing the status quo. On the positive side, what we can offer you is what we've offered at no cost since 2005, which are recommended minimum guidelines for open water swimming event safety. They were copied on the website for the event here. They were assembled by professional life-saving agencies from around the U.S. who've overseen open water event safety for decades. Those standards involve separating safety oversight from overall race management. They involve pre-event safety planning, taking worst-case scenarios into account. They involve providing lifeguards in adequate numbers trained in the environment where the event's taking place, personal escorts in some cases, adequate medical services, adequate observation platforms so that the people observing the event can actually see down and see what's going on with the athletes, and so on. So what we offer is our help and support in creating norms and standards that truly, genuinely, sincerely make safety the priority. It may not be cheap and easy, but in any case, there are plenty of examples of places it's being done right. So the question is, can we find a way to make that the norm? In the limited time we've got this morning, we can't tell you everything we do to make the open water swims we watch over safe. What we can offer is some examples of how our affiliated agencies do it in a couple of cases. Hopefully these will open the door to some discussions and some possibilities of what we would recommend in terms of what you might be able to do to improve things. Ralph Godo, the Ocean Safety Administrator for the City and County of Honolulu, will give you a brief overview of how they do it there and some of the experiences that they've had and how they've learned from them. Lieutenant Greg Buchanan of the San Diego Lifeguard Service will then give you a similar overview of how the San Diego Lifeguards safeguard the La Jolla rough water swim and have been doing it for decades. Let's focus our attention on the safety of the athletes. Let's all acknowledge what we know and what we don't know. Let's leave here with a commitment to do right by the athletes. They're placing their trust, their safety, their lives in our hands. We owe them getting it right. And we can. Thank you very much.